He went out for solitude, but instead he found the fierce love of an Apache woman. Daniel Reeves had always believed that silence could heal him. For years he lived in a crowded city where every street was full of noise and every day felt rushed. He worked long hours, answered endless messages, and rarely had time to sit quietly with his own thoughts. At first he told himself that this busy life was normal. Everyone around him lived the same way, always moving, always trying to keep up. But slowly he began to feel tired in a way that sleep could not fix. A painful breakup had made things worse. The relationship had lasted for years, and when it ended, Daniel felt as if the ground under him had shifted. He tried to continue his routine, but everything felt empty. The apartment he once shared now felt too quiet at night. Yet the city outside was too loud during the day. He stopped, enjoying the things he used to love. Even small tasks felt heavy. Friends invited him out, but he often made excuses. He needed something different, something that could help him breathe again. One evening, after another long and exhausting day, Daniel sat by his window and stared at the city lights. Cars moved like streams of light below him, and distant sirens echoed through the streets. He realized that he had not felt true peace in a very long time. That night, he made a simple decision. He would leave for a while. He would go somewhere quiet, somewhere wide and open, where he could be alone with his thoughts. He didn't want adventure or excitement. He just wanted silence. After a few days of planning, Daniel packed only what he needed. He chose the American Southwest as his destination, a place known for its open skies and endless desert land. He had seen pictures of it before. Vast stretches of sand and rock, mountains in the distance, and sunsets that painted the sky in deep colors. It felt like the kind of place where a person could disappear from the noise of the world and find clarity. When he arrived, the first thing he noticed was the space. British. Everything felt bigger than he expected. The sky seemed wider, the air clearer, and the silence deeper. It wasn't the empty silence of his apartment back in the city. This silence felt alive. The wind moved gently across the land, and the distant sound of birds echoed through the open space. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt his shoulders relax. He rented a small cabin not far from a remote area of land near an Apache community. The cabin was simple, with wooden walls, a small kitchen, and a porch that faced the open desert. It was far enough from town that he wouldn't see many people, which was exactly what he wanted. He told himself that this time was only for him. No deep friendships. No complicated emotions. Just quiet days and long walks. In the first few days, Daniel settled into a simple routine. By any more, I will be a nighttime after. He woke up early each morning and stepped outside to watch the sunrise. The sky would slowly change colors from soft gray to warm orange and pink. He made coffee and sat on the porch, listening to the wind and the distant sounds of nature. Sometimes he wrote in a journal, filling the pages with thoughts he had kept inside for years. Other times, he simply sat and watched the horizon. He spent his afternoons walking along dusty trails and rocky paths. The land was beautiful in a way that felt calm and steady. Tall cacti stood like silent guards, and scattered rocks created natural shapes that looked different in every light. Daniel found comfort in the rhythm of walking. Step by step, he felt the tension inside him begin to loosen. He didn't have to rush. There was nowhere he needed to be. But evenings were his favorite time. The sunsets in the desert were unlike anything he had seen before. The sky turned deep shades of red and gold, and the mountains in the distance looked almost painted. He often stood outside until the last light faded, letting the quiet settle around him. At night, the stars filled the sky so clearly that he could see patterns he had never noticed in the city. It felt as if the world had slowed down just for him. But as the days passed, Daniel began to notice something unexpected. The silence he had wanted so badly started to feel different. At first it was comforting, like a soft blanket. Then it became heavier. Without the constant noise of the city, his thoughts grew louder. Memories he had tried to ignore came back to him. He thought about the relationship he had lost, the mistakes he believed he had made, and the way he had run from his problems instead of facing them. He told himself that this was part of the healing process. Being alone meant he had to face his own mind. Still, some evenings felt longer than others. He would sit on the porch and wonder if he had chosen the right path.
He didn't regret coming, but he hadn't expected the loneliness to feel so strong.
Rasp. One afternoon, about a week into his stay, Daniel decided to explore a trail he hadn't walked before. The path led him through a rocky area with small hills and scattered shrubs. The air was warm and the sun shone brightly overhead. He walked slowly, taking in the view and enjoying the quiet. For a while, everything felt peaceful. But as he moved farther from the cabin, the trail became harder to follow. The rocks looked similar in every direction, and the landmarks he thought he remembered seemed to disappear. He realized he might have walked farther than he intended. Break. When he tried to turn back, he stepped awkwardly on a loose stone and twisted his ankle. Pain shot through his leg, and he had to sit down. Daniel took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. The injury didn't seem serious, but it made walking difficult. He looked around, hoping to spot something familiar. The land stretched out in every direction, quiet and wide. For a moment, he felt a small wave of worry. He had wanted solitude, but not this kind of helplessness. He slowly stood and tried to walk, leaning on a nearby rock for support. Each step was careful and slow. He wasn't sure how long it would take to get back, but he knew he had to try. The sun moved higher in the sky, and the heat grew stronger. He focused on putting one foot in front of the other. After some time, he noticed movement in the distance. At first, he thought it might be an animal. Then he realized it was a person. A woman walked across the rocky ground with steady steps, as if she knew every part of the land. She moved with confidence and calm, carrying herself in a way that showed strength.
As she came closer, Daniel felt both relief and uncertainty.
He hadn't expected to see anyone out here. The woman stopped a short distance away and looked at him with sharp, observant eyes. She seemed to understand the situation quickly. Without many words, she asked if he was hurt. Her voice was calm but firm.
Daniel explained that he had twisted his ankle and lost his way.
The woman nodded slightly and stepped closer to examine his footing. She introduced herself as Ayana. Her presence felt grounded, as if she belonged to the land itself. She didn't show surprise or concern in an exaggerated way. Brace. Instead, she simply helped him stand and guided him toward a safer path.
They walked slowly together.
Ayana moved with ease, adjusting her pace so Daniel could keep up. She pointed out landmarks he hadn't noticed before, certain rocks, plants, and natural signs that marked the way. Her knowledge of the land was clear. Daniel realized how little he understood about the place he had come to for peace. When they finally reached a familiar area near his cabin, Daniel felt a deep sense of gratitude. He thanked her sincerely for helping him. Ayana gave a small nod, as if helping was simply the right thing to do. She didn't ask many questions, and she didn't linger. After making sure he could manage on his own, she turned and began to walk away.
Daniel watched her go, feeling something shift inside him.
He had come to this place to be alone, to avoid connections and keep to himself. Yet this brief meeting left an impression he couldn't ignore. There was strength in the way she carried herself, and a calm confidence that felt different from anything he had known. He stepped onto his porch and sat down, letting the quiet return. The desert stretched out before him, just as wide and silent as before. But now, the silence felt slightly different. It wasn't empty anymore. Somewhere out there, someone moved through the land with purpose and strength. Daniel told himself it was just a passing moment, a simple act of kindness from a stranger.
He came here for solitude, and that was still what he needed.
Yet, as the sun began to set and the sky turned warm shades of gold, he found himself thinking about the woman who had appeared when he needed help. He wondered if their paths would cross again, or if this had been a single brief meeting in the middle of a vast and quiet land. The next morning Daniel woke up earlier than usual. The desert air felt cooler, and the sky slowly turned from soft gray to pale orange. He stepped outside with a cup of coffee and sat on the porch of his small cabin. The land in front of him stretched far into the distance, quiet and calm. Normally he enjoyed this peaceful view without any interruption, but today his mind kept returning to the woman he had met the day before. He remembered how steady her steps were on the rocky ground, and how she had guided him back without hesitation. There had been no sign of panic or confusion in her actions. She had simply understood the land and moved through it with confidence. But Daniel realized that without her help, he might have struggled for hours. He felt thankful, but also curious. He didn't know much about her except her name, Ayana, and the quiet strength she carried. He told himself that it was only a brief encounter. Breaths. People crossed paths all the time and then went their separate ways. Still, the memory stayed with him. As he sipped his coffee, he noticed how different the morning felt. The silence of the desert was still there, but now it held a sense of connection. Someone else lived in this wide space. Someone who understood it deeply. Daniel spent most of the morning resting his ankle. It was still a little sore, but not serious. Tidying up and writing in his journal, he wrote about the meeting, about how strange it felt to see another person after days of being alone. Grasp. He admitted to himself that the encounter had brought a small spark of energy into his quiet routine. By the afternoon, he decided to drive to the nearest small store. He needed a few supplies, and he thought the short trip might help him feel less isolated. The store was simple and modest, with wooden shelves and a few people moving about quietly. It was not crowded like the markets back in the city. Everyone seemed calm and unhurried.
As Daniel walked through the store, he noticed familiar items: fresh bread, canned food, and a few handmade goods. He picked up what he needed and moved toward the counter.
That was when he saw her again. Ayana stood near one of the shelves, examining a small basket. See, she looked just as calm and steady as before, dressed simply and moving with quiet confidence. For a moment, Daniel hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should speak to her or simply nod in greeting. But before he could decide, she noticed him. Their eyes met briefly. She gave a small nod, not unfriendly, but not overly warm either. It was the kind of greeting that showed recognition without inviting too much conversation. Daniel walked closer and thanked her again for helping him the day before. He spoke sincerely, choosing his words carefully.
Ayana listened, her expression calm and observant.
She accepted his thanks with a quiet, "You're welcome," as if the matter needed no further attention. There was a short pause between them, not uncomfortable, but not easy either. He realized that she was not someone who spoke just to fill silence. She seemed to choose her words carefully, and when she had nothing to say, she remained quiet. Daniel respected that. He didn't want to push for conversation where it wasn't welcome. Breaths. Still, he felt a small desire to know more about her, about the life she lived in this vast land. They exchanged a few simple words about the weather and the trails nearby. Ayana mentioned that some paths were harder to follow than they looked. Her tone was not critical, but there was a hint of gentle warning. Daniel nodded, understanding that he still had much to learn about the place. He appreciated her honesty. After paying for his supplies, he stepped outside. The sunlight felt warm on his face. He loaded the items into his car and sat for a moment before driving back. The meeting had been brief, but it stayed with him. He realized that even a short conversation could feel meaningful in a place where days passed in silence. Back at the cabin, Daniel returned to his routine. He cooked a simple meal and spent time reading. But now, the quiet felt slightly different. It no longer felt like complete isolation. Somewhere not too far away, there were people who lived with purpose and connection to the land. Ayana was one of them. Over the next few days, Daniel found himself paying closer attention to the area around him, though he noticed small details he had missed before. Footprints in the sand, distant figures moving along the hills, and faint sounds carried by the wind.
The land was not empty.
It was alive with quiet activity. One morning, while walking along a safer path, he saw Ayana again. But she stood near a group of children, showing them how to weave small patterns with natural materials. Her movements were patient and steady. The children listened carefully, watching her hands as she demonstrated each step. Daniel stayed at a respectful distance, not wanting to interrupt. He observed how naturally she guided them. She didn't rush or raise her voice. Instead, she showed them by example. The children seemed comfortable around her, and they looked up to her with trust. Daniel realized that she was an important part of her community. She wasn't just someone passing through the land. She belonged to it, and it belonged to her. After some time, the children finished their activity and left. Ayana noticed Daniel standing nearby. This time, she approached him first. Her expression was calm, but there was a hint of curiosity. She asked if his ankle was better. Daniel told her it was improving and thanked her again for helping him that day. Their conversation lasted a little longer this time. They spoke about the desert, about how the land changed with the seasons, and about the importance of respecting the environment. Ayana spoke with quiet confidence, sharing small pieces of information without revealing too much about herself. Daniel listened carefully, appreciating her perspective. He realized that she didn't trust easily. There was a protective layer around her, built from experience and understanding. But beneath that, there was kindness! It showed in the way she spoke about the land and the people around her. Daniel didn't want to break that trust by asking too many personal questions. Instead, he focused on listening. As the days passed, their paths crossed a few more times. Each meeting was brief but meaningful. They spoke about simple things, weather, trails, and the beauty of the desert. Slowly, a quiet familiarity began to grow. It wasn't friendship yet, but it was more than just two strangers passing by. Daniel found himself looking forward to these small encounters. Brave. They added a sense of warmth to his otherwise solitary days. He still valued his quiet time, but now he understood that connection didn't always have to be loud or overwhelming. But sometimes it could exist in small conversations and shared moments. Ayana, on the other hand, remained observant. She watched how Daniel behaved in the area. She noticed that he didn't leave trash behind, that he walked carefully on the trails, and that he respected the space around him. These small actions mattered. They showed that he wasn't just a visitor passing through without care. One afternoon, as they stood watching the sunset from a distance, Daniel felt a sense of calm he hadn't felt in years. The sky turned shades of gold and deep orange, and the air grew cooler. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The quiet between them felt comfortable, not awkward. Daniel realized that the solitude he had come seeking was changing. He was still alone most of the time, but he no longer felt completely cut off from the world. Ayana's presence, even in small moments, reminded him that connection could exist without taking away his peace. He still didn't know much about her life, and she didn't know everything about his. But there was a growing sense of understanding. It was built slowly, through patience and respect. Neither of them rushed the process. The desert moved at its own pace, and so did they. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared, Daniel felt a quiet sense of gratitude. He had come to this place to escape noise and confusion. Instead, he had found something unexpected, a steady presence that challenged his idea of solitude. As the days moved forward, Daniel and Ayana began to see each other more often, but their connection did not grow quickly or easily. It grew slowly, like a small plant in dry land that needed time and care. Each meeting added a little more understanding, but it also revealed how different their worlds were, Round and Mr. Opes. Daniel still spent most of his time alone at the cabin. He kept writing in his journal, walking along the safer trails, and watching the wide sky change colors every evening. But now he carried a new awareness. He knew that this land was not empty. It belonged to people who had lived here for generations, people who understood its rhythms and respected its silence. Ayana was one of them. Breath. He never forgot that. Whenever they met, their conversations stayed simple at first. They spoke about the land, the weather, and the small changes that came with each passing day. But Daniel sometimes found himself wanting to ask more questions. He was curious about her life, her family, and her connection to the land. He tried to be respectful, yet sometimes his curiosity came out in ways that felt too direct. One afternoon, while they walked along a rocky path, Daniel asked about the traditions she followed. He spoke carefully, but his question still carried the tone of someone who didn't fully understand the depth of what he was asking. Ayana stopped walking and looked at him with a steady gaze. Her expression was calm, but there was a firmness in her eyes. Breaths. She told him that some things were not meant to be explained quickly or to someone who had just arrived. Her voice was not harsh, but it carried weight. She explained that her culture was not something to be treated like a story for entertainment. It was a living part of her life, shaped by family, history, and responsibility. Daniel felt a sudden wave of embarrassment. He realized he had spoken without thinking deeply enough. He apologized quietly and told her he didn't mean any disrespect. He explained that he was still learning and that he wanted to understand, not to intrude. Ayana studied his face for a moment, as if deciding whether to accept his words. Then she gave a small nod.
She said that learning was good, but it had to come with patience and humility.
Respect came first, before curiosity. That moment created a new kind of distance between them, but it was not a negative distance. It was a space filled with honesty. Daniel understood that building trust would take time. He could not expect quick closeness or easy answers. He had come to this place to find peace, and now he realized that peace also meant learning to listen without rushing. Over the next few days, Daniel became more careful in his actions. He focused on showing respect through small things. When he walked on the trails, he stayed on the paths that were clearly used. He picked up any trash he saw, even if it wasn't his.
He greeted people politely but didn't force conversation. He let the land and the community move at their own pace.
Ayana noticed these changes. She observed quietly, the way she always did. She saw that Daniel did not try to impress anyone or act like he knew everything. He listened more than he spoke. When he didn't understand something, he waited instead of asking right away. These small choices mattered, as they showed that he was willing to learn. One afternoon, dark clouds gathered over the desert. The air felt heavy, and the wind picked up speed. Daniel had gone out for a short walk, thinking he would return before any rain came. But the sky changed quickly. A sudden storm rolled in, bringing strong wind and sharp drops of rain. The desert, usually so dry, came alive with movement and sound. Daniel looked around for shelter and spotted a small rock formation that offered some cover. As he hurried toward it, he saw another figure moving in the same direction. It was Ayana. She reached the shelter first and stepped inside, making room for him without a word. The rain grew stronger, hitting the ground in fast, steady patterns. They stood together under the natural cover, listening to the sound of the storm. For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind howled across the open land, and flashes of light appeared in the distant sky. It was a powerful moment, the kind that made people feel small in the face of nature.
After some time, Ayana broke the silence.
She said that storms like this were rare, but important. They brought life to the land, even if they seemed sudden and strong. Daniel nodded, watching the rain fall in sheets across the desert. He realized how little he knew about this place compared to her. She spoke about the land as if it were a living friend. The storm forced them to stay there longer than expected. With nowhere to go and nothing to distract them, their conversation slowly deepened. Ayana shared small pieces of her life. She spoke about her family and how they stayed connected to their traditions. She explained that her days were filled with helping others, teaching younger members of the community, and taking care of the land in small ways. Daniel listened carefully. He didn't interrupt or try to compare her life to his own. He simply absorbed her words. When she finished, there was a quiet pause. Then he spoke about himself. He admitted that he had come to the desert because he felt lost. He told her about his past relationship, about how he had worked too much and ignored his own feelings. He said that he thought solitude would fix everything. Ayana listened in the same calm way he had listened to her. She didn't offer quick advice or easy comfort. She simply acknowledged his words. She said that running away from pain might create space, but it didn't always create healing. Sometimes healing came from facing things slowly, with honesty. Daniel thought about that as the rain continued to fall. He realized that she was right. He had come here to escape his problems, not to understand them. But being in this place, surrounded by quiet and by people who respected the land, was slowly changing him. When the storm finally began to fade, the air felt fresh and cool. The ground smelled clean, and small streams of water moved across the rocky surface. They stepped out from the shelter and looked at the transformed landscape. The desert looked different after rain, more alive, more open. As they walked back toward the main path, their steps felt more in sync than before. The conversation they had shared created a new level of understanding. It didn't erase the differences between them, but it built a bridge. They no longer felt like complete strangers. Still, challenges remained. Some members of Ayana's community noticed Daniel's presence and watched him with cautious eyes. They were protective of their space and their people. Daniel understood that trust had to be earned, not assumed. He greeted everyone politely and kept his distance when needed. Ayana also remained careful. She did not let their growing connection become too fast or too close. She believed in steady steps, in watching actions over time, but she no longer kept the same distance she once had. When they spoke, there was more warmth in her voice, more ease in the silence between them. Daniel began to realize that his idea of solitude was changing. Narration. He had come to be alone, to avoid complications and emotional ties. But now he saw that connection didn't always bring chaos. Sometimes it brought clarity. Sometimes it helped a person see themselves more clearly. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, they stood quietly watching the sky turn deep shades of red and gold. The air felt calm after the recent storm, and the land seemed to glow softly in the fading light. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The quiet between them felt natural. Daniel thought about how far he had come in just a short time. He was still healing, still learning, but he was no longer hiding from everything. Ayana's presence challenged him in ways he hadn't expected. She reminded him that respect, patience, and honesty were the foundation of any true connection. He knew there were still barriers between them. Their lives were different, their experiences shaped by different worlds. But there was also a growing understanding that felt steady and real. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was quiet, like the desert itself. As the last light faded and the stars began to appear, Daniel felt a sense of calm settle inside him. He had come searching for silence, thinking it would be empty and still. Instead, he found a silence that allowed space for growth, for reflection, and for connection. As the weeks passed, the quiet connection between Daniel and Ayana continued to grow, but it did not grow in a simple or easy way. Their bond was built slowly, with careful steps and honest actions. Neither of them rushed anything. The desert around them seemed to guide the pace, steady and patient. Daniel's days no longer felt empty. He still valued his time alone, but now he carried a sense of purpose. He woke early, walked along the familiar paths, and spent time writing and thinking. Yet he also found small ways to be helpful. When he noticed someone carrying heavy supplies near the local store, he offered to help. When he saw trash left behind on a trail, he picked it up without being asked. He didn't do these things to impress anyone. He simply felt it was the right thing to do. Ayana watched all of this quietly. She did not praise him openly, but she noticed the changes. "If this was not enough for you!" She saw that he moved through the land with more awareness now. He stepped carefully, greeted people with respect, and listened more than he spoke. These small actions mattered to her. They showed that he wasn't just visiting for his own peace. He was learning to respect the place and the people who lived there. Their conversations became longer, though still calm and thoughtful. They often met in the late afternoon, when the heat softened and the sky began to change colors. Sometimes they walked along the edge of the hills, looking out over the wide land. Other times they sat near a quiet spot and talked about simple things. Ayana shared stories about her childhood, about learning from her elders, and about the importance of staying connected to the land. Daniel shared pieces of his own past, though he was careful not to let his words turn into long complaints. He spoke honestly, but gently. What surprised Daniel most was the strength in Ayana's way of caring. She did not show affection in loud or dramatic ways. Instead, her care was steady and protective. When she spoke, she meant every word. When she listened, she gave her full attention. If she said she would do something, she did it without hesitation. Her loyalty to her family and community was clear in everything she did.
One evening, Daniel helped carry supplies for a small gathering.
He wasn't part of the community, but he had been invited to assist with simple tasks. He kept to the background, not wanting to intrude. He moved tables, brought water, and followed instructions quietly. Ayana noticed his effort. She saw that he didn't try to take center stage or draw attention to himself. He simply helped where he could. After the gathering, as people began to leave, Ayana walked with him toward the main path. The sky above them was deep blue, with stars beginning to appear. She spoke softly, telling him that she appreciated his respect and patience. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. For Daniel, that small moment meant more than he expected. Still, not everyone felt comfortable with his presence. Some members of Ayana's circle watched him with caution. They were protective of their space and their traditions. They had seen outsiders come and go before, some with good intentions, and others without. Brass. Daniel understood this. He didn't blame them for being careful. Trust had to be earned over time. Ayana also felt the pressure. She cared about her community deeply, and their opinions mattered to her. She did not want to create tension or make anyone uncomfortable. Breath.
Yet she also believed in her own judgment. She had seen how Daniel behaved, how he listened and learned.
She trusted her ability to see people clearly. Still, she moved carefully, balancing her feelings with her responsibilities. As Daniel and Ayana spent more time together, the nature of their connection became clearer. It was no longer just a simple friendship. There was a deeper bond forming, one built on honesty and respect, but it was not soft or easy. Ayana's way of caring was strong and direct. She did not hide her expectations. If Daniel wanted to be part of her life in any meaningful way, he had to be steady and truthful. He had to face his fears instead of running from them. One afternoon, they sat on a rocky hill watching the wind move across the land. The air felt warm, and the sky stretched endlessly above them.
Ayana spoke about commitment. She said that caring for someone meant more than just enjoying their company.
It meant standing by them, being honest even when it was difficult, and respecting their world without trying to change it. Daniel listened carefully. Her words made him think about his past. That he had spent years avoiding deep commitment after being hurt. He had told himself that distance was safer. But now, he realized that true connection required courage. It required the willingness to stay present even when things felt uncertain. He admitted to her that he was still learning. He told her that he didn't want to run away anymore, but he also didn't want to make promises he couldn't keep. Ayana appreciated his honesty. She said that strong bonds were not built on perfect words. They were built on consistent actions. She didn't expect him to change overnight, but he only expected him to be real. Their connection deepened in quiet ways. They shared meals occasionally, simple and calm. They walked together in silence, comfortable without needing constant conversation. They laughed at small moments, like when the wind picked up suddenly or when a distant bird made an unusual sound. These shared experiences created a sense of closeness that felt natural. Yet challenges still appeared. One day, Daniel overheard a conversation where someone questioned his intentions. The words were not loud, but they were clear enough. It made him pause and reflect. He wondered if he truly belonged here, or if he was only a temporary presence in a world that was not his. He didn't want to cause tension or make anyone feel uneasy. That evening, he spoke to Ayana about it. He told her that he didn't want to create problems for her or her community. He said that if his presence made things difficult, he would understand if she needed distance. Ayana listened calmly. Brash. Then she told him that trust took time, but it also required courage. She said that she would not make decisions based on fear or pressure.
She would choose what felt right, and she believed in her own judgment. Her words showed the fierce side of her care.
She was not gentle in a weak way. She was strong, and steady. When she chose to care for someone, she did so fully. She did not let outside opinions control her choices, but she also respected the concerns of those around her. She balanced strength with understanding. Daniel began to see that her way of loving was powerful, but it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was protective, loyal, and deeply rooted in respect. It challenged him to be better, to be more honest with himself. He realized that if he wanted to be part of her life, he had to stop hiding behind his old fears. As more time passed, Daniel felt a shift inside him. The solitude he had come seeking had changed shape. He was still alone in many ways, but he no longer felt isolated. He had found a connection that grounded him. It didn't take away his peace. Instead, it strengthened it. One evening they stood together watching the sunset. The sky turned deep shades of orange and gold, and the air felt calm. Ayana spoke softly, saying that life often brought unexpected paths. Daniel nodded, understanding what she meant. Brit. He had come to this place to escape and to be alone. Instead, he had found something steady and real. He realized that fierce care was not about control or intensity. It was about standing strong, being honest, and choosing connection with clear eyes. Ayana's presence had shown him that true peace did not come from running away. It came from facing life with courage and respect. As the last light faded and the stars appeared, they stood quietly side by side. The desert stretched out before them, wide and calm. Daniel felt a deep sense of gratitude. He didn't know exactly what the future would hold, but he knew he was no longer the same person who had arrived seeking only silence. He had found something stronger than solitude. He had found a connection built on patience, honesty, and a fierce kind of care that asked for truth in return. And for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to meet whatever came next. Not alone, but with steady steps beside someone who understood the strength of the land and the strength of the heart.
In the weeks that followed, Daniel felt a calm change inside himself.
When he first arrived in the desert, he believed he needed to be alone to find peace. Now he understood that peace did not always mean distance from people. Sometimes it meant learning how to stand still without running away. Sometimes it meant allowing connection to grow slowly and honestly. He woke one morning before sunrise and stepped outside his cabin. The sky was still dark, but a faint light rested on the horizon. The air felt cool, and the land around him was quiet. He stood there for a long moment, breathing slowly. He realized that this place no longer felt like an escape. It felt like a space where he had learned to see himself more clearly. Breaths. Daniel's routine had changed over time. He still spent time alone, writing and walking, but he also spent more time near the small community. He helped with simple tasks when he was asked. He greeted people with respect and kept his presence gentle. He never pushed himself into spaces where he was not invited. He understood that trust was something that grew slowly, like the desert plants that survived with patience. Ayana continued to be a steady presence in his life. Their bond had deepened, but it remained grounded and calm. They did not rush into promises or dramatic plans. Instead, they shared time and understanding. Some days they walked together along the quiet paths. Other days they simply met briefly, exchanged a few words, and went their separate ways. Every interaction felt meaningful, even when it was simple. Daniel admired the strength in Ayana's way of living. This made many responsibilities, family, community, and the land itself. She moved through her days with purpose. She did not waste words or energy on things that did not matter. When she cared for someone, she did so with loyalty and honesty. Her presence made Daniel feel steady. She did not try to change him. but she encouraged him to face himself with courage. One afternoon they sat together under the shade of a tall rock formation. The wind moved gently across the land, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant plants.
Ayana spoke about change. She said that life moved in cycles, like the seasons.
People came and went, but the land remained.
She believed that when someone found a place where they felt grounded, they should take time to understand why.
Daniel listened carefully. He knew that his time in the desert had changed him. He no longer felt the same restless energy that had pushed him away from his old life. The pain he had carried when he arrived had softened. It had not disappeared completely, but it no longer controlled him. He felt stronger and more patient. He admitted to Ayana that he had been thinking about what to do next. Part of him felt ready to return to the world he had left behind. But another part of him wanted to stay longer, to continue learning and growing. He didn't want to rush his decision. Gravity. Understand des. She told him that decisions made from calm reflection were stronger than those made from confusion. She did not pressure him to stay or to leave. She simply reminded him that whatever he chose, he should choose it with honesty. She respected his journey and trusted him to find his own path. Days turned into more weeks. Daniel continued to help where he could. He fixed small things around his cabin, walked the trails, and shared quiet moments with Ayana. The connection between them became steady and real. It was not filled with grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was built on trust, patience, and shared understanding. One evening, a small gathering took place near the community. Daniel was invited to attend. He approached the gathering with respect, staying aware of his place. He listened to stories, watched people interact, and felt a quiet sense of belonging. He knew he was still an outsider in many ways, but he also felt accepted in small, meaningful ways.
Ayana stood beside him during part of the evening.
They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Their presence together felt natural. Daniel realized that this connection had grown without pressure or expectation. It had formed through time and shared experiences.
Later that night, he walked back to his cabin under a sky filled with stars.
The desert air felt calm and steady. He thought about the man he had been when he arrived, tired, lost, and running from his own thoughts. He had believed that solitude would fix everything. Instead, solitude had shown him his own fears and allowed him to face them slowly.
Meeting Ayana had been unexpected. He had not come looking for connection.
Yet her presence had helped him understand that true peace did not mean shutting the world out. It meant finding balance. It meant standing still without fear and allowing life to move around him naturally. The next morning, Daniel made a quiet decision. He would not rush back to his old life just yet. He would stay longer, continue learning, and build trust through consistent actions. He wanted to make sure that whatever path he chose next would come from clarity and strength, not from the need to escape. When he shared this with Ayana, she nodded calmly. She told him that time was a good teacher. She respected his choice to stay and continue growing. She also reminded him that life would eventually call him forward, whether that meant staying longer or moving on. What mattered was that he carried what he had learned with him. Their bond remained steady. They shared simple meals, quiet walks, and honest conversations. There was a deep respect between them. They did not try to control the future. They allowed it to unfold naturally. Each day brought small moments of understanding and calm. As the weeks turned into months, Daniel felt a sense of grounding he had never felt before. He had come searching for silence, and he had found it. But he had also found something more powerful, a connection that did not take away his peace, but strengthened it. Yana's fierce and steady care had shown him that love did not have to be loud or overwhelming. It could be calm, loyal, and deeply rooted in respect. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, Daniel stood on the porch of his cabin and looked out over the land. The sky glowed with warm colors, and the air felt still. He realized that the solitude he had wanted at the beginning was different from the solitude he felt now. Back then, he wanted to hide from everything. Now he felt at peace within himself, even with others nearby. He understood that life would continue to move forward. There would be choices to make and paths to follow. But he no longer felt the urge to run. He felt ready to face whatever came next with calm and honesty. Whether he stayed longer or eventually returned to his old world, he would carry the lessons of this place with him. Yana joined him on the porch that evening. They stood side by side, watching the last light fade. The desert stretched out quietly before them. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence between them felt full, not empty. It held understanding, respect, and a quiet kind of care that did not need many words. Daniel realized that he had come looking for solitude and had found something deeper, a fierce and steady connection that helped him become stronger and more grounded. He had learned that true peace did not mean being alone. It meant being honest with himself and open to the kind of connection that supported growth. As the stars appeared in the dark sky, Daniel felt a quiet sense of gratitude. He did not know exactly where life would lead him next, but he knew he was no longer running from his past. He was moving forward with steady steps, carrying the strength he had found in the desert and the fierce, loyal care of someone who had shown him what it meant to stand strong and remain true.